Hello, this is Joe Welinske, and I'm doing a UA cast talking with some of the people who are going to be at our event in Charleston in late October, and I'm visiting today with John Daigle. Hello, John, how are you?
Hey, Joe. Great. Can't wait till Charleston.
And where are you talking to us from today?
Well, right now I'm in my cabin in the woods in Evergreen, Colorado, and I'm sort of positioned in the middle of the country so I can fly in either direction.
So, where exactly is Evergreen?
Well, it's about I'd say 45 minutes from downtown Denver, so it's not too far from there. And
Like
but
toward
it, we're
Boulder?
it's a little farther away than Boulder. It's due west and about uh, 8,000 feet, so
Oh,
chilly.
like toward Winter Park?
In that direction, right?
Oh, all right. Well, I don't ski anymore because my knees are destroyed. But anyway, it'd be nice
Well, I
to.
switched to scuba diving, so no
There
more
you go.
skiing for me.
Well, anyway, I wanted to talk with you about some of the things that you're working on, and one of those is particularly with responsive design, and that's something that, in fact, I talked about a lot in the new edition of my mobile UA book because it's just more and more people are using that as a way to be able to uh, present information on a variety of different devices and screens and that type of thing. And you see it more and more in websites. But why don't you tell me a little bit about some things how you're using it with respect to user assistance projects?
Sure. Well, there's sort of two pieces to the puzzle. A lot of folks are still steeped in the sort of text world with web user assistance, or either for application help or developing knowledge bases. And so, what's the biggest movement seems to me that they're starting to incorporate more and more video tutorials with that. So it happens that what I work with most is RoboHelp and Captivate, which sort of has a foot in each one of those. And so the folks that I'm working with are still kind of trying to figure out how to move out of the text driven world. And your book talks about what you call aggressive editing. I love that term, and we can't use that enough. Uh, and so it's not just small screens or large screens, as you've pointed out yourself. Our end users are now not only looking at different screens, they're walking around. They may be moving from one place to the next. Hopefully, they're not driving, but that's
Yeah, they're probably driving.
right. So, so it's just getting crazier and crazier. So, as you may recall, about 1.5, 2 years ago, most of the help authoring tools, in order to provide some kind of mobile offering, came out with something called adaptive layouts, and more jargon for us. All it meant was that the author had to adjust their CSS and their HTML5 and so forth to using something called media queries in order to provide the proper content for whichever device somebody came by to visit with. And so that obviously is possible. It's still being done and still has its use cases. But in the meantime, uh, the technology has grown so that responsive design, which simply means that you've got one output or one set of content, so that whatever device happens to drop by, the content adapts and responds, to the screen that's visiting it. And certainly this makes it easier for the author to concentrate on what they really need to concentrate, and that is the content. Because as you've pointed out in your book, uh, that aggressive editing you so correctly talk about is not easy, and it takes time. And that's something writers usually don't have much of. So, in order to provide that time for spending time on the editing of the content, it's nice if we don't have to worry so much about the technology of fiddling around with media queries and CSS and so forth. Obviously, it's a good thing to know about those things, but the less we have to concern about it and look at the editing, the better.
Well, I mean, so going along with what you just said right there, I, I don't. Well, maybe most people do know or not know, whatever. I wonder how many people just learning about responsive design, whether the message is clear that all of that CSS media query, all that is JavaScript is all still going on behind the scenes under the hood, and essentially whatever authoring tool that you're working with is creating their own solution of what responsive design means. And in a way it's like a new category of skins. So authoring tool vendors have had different versions of web-based help, browser-based help, and they'll put a skin on it with the navigation and the content in certain uh, certain different arrangements. And that's still going on now, right? And so how the tool you choose is doing that, essentially you're buying into that design, right?
That's true, and some folks are more comfortable or knowledgeable about, CSS and those things you mentioned, and others are not. They're relying more on the tool. So it's going to depend, as everything does. I think it also explains why it's so important, to do due diligence in taking a look at tools. It's not always one tool that fits your job, and folks really should be evaluating, downloading trials, and getting behind the hype and the promotional material, in getting hands on and going to conferences like we're going to have in Charleston and see what other people have done in person, and ask the right questions. Sometimes you don't even know. It reminds me of learning management systems and how much shelfware is out there and money that's been wasted with LMSs because somebody just didn't think about, okay, what is it we really need when we're shopping for a tool?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm gonna kind of be interested to see what goes on as people start using the responsive design outputs more actively, and see whether I don't know whether people are just taking for granted, oh, okay, that's responsive design. So I'm using RoboHelp and I'm using the responsive design output target, and I'm going to produce that, and there it is, and that's responsive design, or whether the idea that that's like one way that it could be responsive design. But I mean, for most people, that is what they're going to use, is what that design is. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah, and I suppose for a lot of folks, responsive design as well. I've generated web help, whatever, whether it's Doctor Help or Flare or whatever tool might be used. The conventional workhorse, of the web help is such that, if somebody looks at their cell phone or their laptop or their iPad and said, well, my output fits, it squishes down, so it must be okay. It must be responsive because it's getting smaller, which means the end user has to, pinch and spread and zoom and this and that to see the content. So that, you and I know, is certainly not responsive design. It's just
Mhm.
making things optically smaller. So to truly look at the elements, like the navigational elements, in terms of, and whether you should use a table of contents at all, what happens to an index? Is search more relevant? Is it going to be application help? And will you be able to embed it, uh, as we all probably wished it were? Or is it going to have to be somebody clicks on a question mark and all of a sudden the phone browser opens up separately. All of these are design decisions that authors really never had to worry about. They could focus on the content. Now it's really taking up a lot of time. And my concern is, as I travel around, is that a lot of folks are taking the cheap way out. They're just sort of getting by without really, asking what's the user experience.
Mhm.
Uh, and
Well, I think
because
yeah, I mean we've talked about before the idea of actually testing your own work on a variety of devices, and that just looking at it in a desktop simulator emulator, while that can be helpful, you really learn a lot more when you start observing your work on the desktop, laptop, but also an iPhone, and not just an iPhone, but an Android phone and
right?
possibly a Windows phone and a mini tablet, and so on.
And worse, it could actually, this simulator emulators can actually give you a very false idea and sort of a false confidence. So, uh, one of the things that I use that I'll be demonstrating in Charleston is Adobe Edge Inspect. And again, these are just other tools. This is some software that allows you to throw out the output of your project that you're testing to actual real devices, so that in real time you can look at what you're authoring and stack it up against what the real device is showing, so that you get a much better picture. uh, you just cannot test enough. And as you mentioned, in your book and some of your webinars, I've noticed this idea that you need to get the company or the client to invest in some of those tool examples. You can't just get away with whatever your personal iPad or iPhone is.
Right.
Samsung has made a huge impact out there now, and you just can't ignore it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, yeah, when I've talked about this with people, the idea of them having all these devices to be able to test with, they're like, well, that's not possible. And it's, well, when you come into an organization, kind of a base piece of equipment is that you're getting a computer that used to be desktops. Now a lot of people end up with laptops, and you get that because you can't do any work without that. And so I
Right.
think, we'll be at a point where more and more people have devices provided to them. Prices continue to come down on those, but yeah, I think that's important. The other area where I think testing's important is when you're integrating uh, products, like using RoboHelp with Captivate to make sure that you're getting the right user experience. You do a lot of work with RoboHelp. You do a lot of work with Captivate, and the two of them together. So, what are some of the things that you've been doing in bringing those two technologies together? What kind of project things have you noticed?
Right. Well, basically, what folks are needing to look at is, as you've alluded to before, the command verbs, and in terms of writing, uh, the touch. Is it touch? Is it click? Is it tap? Uh, or is it blink? Where you showed that example of somebody using their eyes. Never thought that would be a command, but it's trying to see how they can understand how you have to have courage, is what I call it, to go to your client, your management, whomever, to say, look, uh, we can't just you know do this in terms of these wordy specifications. We need to pare it down and cut it down, because folks are just not going to read it or spend the time. And you get all these legal eagles out there who are saying, "Well, I don't know, we have to include that footnote." I mean, come on, it's real. Yeah, but I think a lot of people just don't have the courage to say, "Hey, this. Let's think of our users. What is the point if they can't read it or won't read it because it's not accessible to them. And then to come up, prototyping turns out to be a really big deal. A lot of times folks don't have the money or the knowledge about how to do true usability studies, but at least they can build some prototypes for themselves or their cube mates, uh, just to take a look at it, and another set of eyes on it can mean a big difference. And the, so prototyping is one of the ways with my clients we're coming up with some ways to at least do some minimal testing.
Have you have you noticed any, or are there any new techniques or opportunities with the latest version of Captivate in integrating with RoboHelp?
Yeah,
You're gonna
as a
be
matter of
talking
fact,
about, you're specifically gonna be talking about RoboHelp Captivate at the conference.
that's right. And what's interesting is that about a year ago, we were explaining how to import Captivate movies, videos, whatever you call them, into RoboHelp projects. So you were taking a sort of a static uh, Captivate demonstration or quiz or whatever, and bringing it into a RoboHelp responsive layout. So the RoboHelp responsive layout was fine. It was accommodating the device, but what was happening is that the Captivate video was not responsive. It's basically a static image. So Captivate 8, which was released a couple of months ago, introduced the whole new concept of, what do you know, responsive layouts is what they call them, in fact. So you can now create breakpoints and even have very specific positions where you want, say a logo or someone's picture or something like that to stay put, as you make a breakpoint. And it's done a real good job of letting you visualize the different devices, so that now, as I'll be explaining, we can not only generate a Captivate HTML5 responsive layout on its own, but by bringing it into RoboHelp, you can then generate that responsive layout in RoboHelp, and so everything is coordinated and makes sense when the user resizes or uses different screen sizes. So that's a really big deal. And in addition, um, branding is a big deal for my clients. A lot of times they'll take a look at the skins or what have you, and they say, well, we have corporate colors, we have a whole design style guide here. How do I accommodate, whether it's the RoboHelp web help layouts or whether it's the Captivate? Styling is a big deal, and so both tools have gone a long, long way to giving flexibility to the author to meet whatever goals that they were given to take care of branding.
All right. Well, yeah. So thanks for giving a little summary of those updates, and we'll get some more of it when I see you at the conference in late October.
Great.
So until then, good luck with all your projects, and I'll see you then, John.
Okay, looking forward to it.
All right, bye bye.
Bye bye.